Welcome to the Happy Prayer Podcast. We are Dave and Steve Flynn, and we're delighted to have you. Today, we've got an absolute treat for you. We've got Dr. Andrew Jenkinson, a bariatric surgeon and weight loss expert that's written 2 incredible best-selling books on the topic.
This is so relevant if you've ever struggled with weight, or you know someone in your family or friend group who've struggled with weight, who've gone on diet, they've lost the weight, and as soon as they go off the diet, the weight comes back on. Andrew really unpacks this with your weight set point, with leptin resistance, and so many, he kind of gives a paradigm shift where you actually understand it.
Yeah, he's got a very fresh take on it that is, it's different, it's succinct, and it's really, really effective. His work's been translated into loads of different languages, and it's one of the most succinct arguments I've heard in terms of weight loss and how it's effective. And it comes back to food, the food choices, the food environment we live in, and as Stephen mentioned there, leptin resistance, insulin resistance, why the hype, like it's really, really, it is a game changer. So please do share this with anyone who, you know, if you do listen to it yourself and find value in it, please share it with anyone you think that this will help them, because I think it's such an important message. It really, really is.
Here's a resolution that's really easy to keep, and something that has hugely benefited our health is wearing Vivo barefoot shoes. We tend to take our footwear for granted, and we tend to forget that at the foundation of all movement is our feet. Our feet, if you wear barefoot shoes, your foot strength will increase by 60% in a matter of months.
That's a study from the University of Liverpool, and that was wearing Vivo barefoot shoes.
Even recently, you went to see a podiatrist and they couldn't get over how much mobility was in your feet and how strong your feet were.
Yeah, so Vivo barefoot shoes, they're amazing. They've got a full range for you and for all the family. You can get 20% off with the code HAPPYPAIR20. You can simply use that at checkout. And we couldn't recommend it more. It's all we've worn for getting up to a decade now. And they've a full range for the full family, including my 1-year-old daughter wears Vivo barefoot shoes.
And my dad, I bought a pair for my dad for Christmas, and dad is 72. So there really is a full range. And I bought dad some waterproof hiking boots, and he adores them.
Yeah, Vivo barefoot waterproof hiking boots. So yeah, you can get 20% off with the code HAPPYPAIR20. Simply go to vivobarefoot.com and use the code there. And as we said, we couldn't recommend it more. It's all we've worn for pretty much the last decade.
Andrew, I love your work. I really do. Your ability to articulate complex, very broad topics and put them in succinct. I think knowledge, information is being able to explain something. Knowledge is being able to make it digestible. I think you speak from the lens of knowledge, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's just from experience and just having an inquiring mind as well. You know, like as the book says, you know, I found myself in a job where, you know, my waiting room was full of people, you know, living with obesity, and you know, I was questioning why they would want such drastic surgery when, you know, most doctors say pull yourself together and go on a diet and go to the gym. So yeah, that was the intriguing thing, was why would anyone want me to take their stomach out? Is it that difficult? You know, is our misunderstanding of weight regulation so flawed that we can't sort this out? Yeah, so that got me into sort of geek mode, and then, you know, I was just looking at everything there, all the previous research, what my patients were experiencing, and telling me, just observing the environment, the environment we have here and in different countries, and trying to put everything together, and then putting it in the book.
Yeah, I loved. I read your second book. Well, I read most of it. Why we eat and too much. Most of it.
Second one is second one, how to eat and still lose weight.
How to eat and still lose weight. Yeah. So I read most of that one. There was a core concept. Before I even get into that, I'd love to kind of go. You said there the advice, like, you know, there's loads of people in your clinic, and why don't they just go on a diet and, you know, start exercising? Like, and for anyone listening who kind of goes, well, that's how you lose weight, isn't it? What are the problems with that? Like, what is your what experience and reference points do you have that have found that is not an effective strategy to losing weight?
So basically, all the patients that I see have tried that, you know, for years and decades, and they can lose weight transiently by calorie restricting, but then the body just adapts to it. So, you know, the body is really good at adapting to the environment. So for instance, if you're normally on, for instance, 1,800 kilocalories a day, that keeps you at your particular weight, and you go down to 1,000 or 1,200. It only takes about a month before the body, you know, adapts to that much lower calorie intake by, you know, drastically cutting your metabolism. And eventually the diet, despite you complying with the diet, you stop losing weight. So you feel, you have all the bad effects of the diet, but no positive weight loss effects. So you will feel absolutely fatigued because your metabolic rate is very, very low. You'll feel cold. You'll feel irritable. You'll be thinking, slowly and more muddledly. And the scales aren't shifting. So this is why people just come off diets. So basically, everyone has the whole concept of the book is everyone has their own individual weight setting. Okay. And unfortunately, sometimes that can be set at an obese or an overweight level, and you can run away from that in the gym or try and calorie restrict your weight away from that high weight setting. But your metabolism, your body will always get you back up to that level, always, eventually. It may take a real fight for a while, but yeah, eventually it will get you back up to that weight. And the weight set point is basically determined. So the only way of permanently resetting your weight is to understand why your weight is set by, the weight controller in your brain, your hypothalamus, why it is set so high. And there are a number of factors that you can't change, including your genetics, which is quite an important factor. We know there's some families that are just naturally slim. There's some families that naturally struggle. But there is other factors. There is factors in your food, which we'll, I think, talk about particularly here, but also in your sort of stress environment and your sleep and relaxation environment. All of these things affect your internal metabolism, particularly insulin. And insulin is the crucial factor determining, your weight set point, whether it's going to be set high or not.
Well, and insulin being the main hormone in that it is the central hormone in terms of type 2 diabetes, which is, having a huge effect on our societies over the last decade and growing.
Yeah, so basically the crux of obesity is this condition called leptin resistance. And I think I mentioned this in a couple of recent lectures, all animals are born, are blessed with a weight regulating system. So just like we can regulate our heartbeat, our hydration, our temperature, our liver function, our digestion, these are all regulated really nicely in our body. And we're taught about these things in medical school. But the other thing that is really important to regulate is the amount of energy that we store inside our bodies, and it's the same with all animals. If you go and watch, if you go on safari or you watch a nature documentary, you don't have a situation where when there is plentiful food around, a herd of zebras get morbidly obese, or a third of them get morbidly obese. It doesn't happen. So all animals have this weight regulating system, which humans have as well. And it's called the leptin system. And basically leptin is this hormone that we produce from our fat cells. And the more fat we have, the higher the leptin level in our blood. And the weight control area in our brain, the hypothalamus, senses the leptin level, and that tells it, how much energy we've got on board inside our bodies, whether we got far too much, we're getting a little bit too fat, or whether we don't have enough. And it will respond, and drive you accordingly to either eat a lot or to pass up food, depending on whether we need more energy coming in, we need to fill up, or whether, it's okay, we got enough energy in. So the leptin signal is crucial. And when it's working, humans generally tend to store about 2 months of energy. So we're okay, if we're in an environment where, there's not much food at all for 2 months, we'll still just about survive. But we don't need to carry 6 months or a year's worth of energy around. Well, if you see people who are obese, that's what they're doing. The problem with leptin is it gets blocked by insulin. So when we're in an environment where the environment itself, and this is food, stress, and sleep environment, causes average levels of insulin to increase. Insulin and leptin share the same receptor on the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that affects our weight and our appetite and our satiety and our metabolism. So when there is more, because of this shared receptor, when there is more insulin, the leptin signal is diluted. And this is the crucial part of obesity.
When there's more insulin, the leptin is diluted. So you said more.
Yeah. So you have a situation where, for instance, you've put on, 10 kilograms, 15 kilograms, 2 stone or whatever. Now, normally that would increase your leptin level in your blood, your hypothalamus would sense it, and you would sort of forget about food for a little while. And naturally, your metabolism would increase, and you would go, the weight control center in your brain would take you back to your weight setting. So it would naturally lose that 2 stone if leptin is working. However, if you put the 2 stone on and you have a lot of insulin in your bloodstream because of an environment of sugar, highly refined carbohydrates, and snacking, and stress, and poor sleep, all of these things cause increase insulin levels, then that increase in the leptin level is going to be diluted and your brain won't see it. So it will then store 4 months worth of energy because it can only see half of the signal, as it were.
That's because the insulin has gone into the receptor instead of the leptin.
Yeah. So the insulin it's a shared pathway.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And this is sort of like it's a bit of an Achilles heel as far as our weight regulating system is concerned. We get a misalignment of it, and it all goes wrong, particularly for populations exposed to a Western diet. So sugar, we know sugar and refined carbohydrates are bad. We know chocolate is bad, ice cream, whatever. But the conventional wisdom is it's bad because it's got too many calories and it's too tasty. Actually, it causes obesity because it blocks the leptin signal.
Wow.
And this is where obesity is being defined as a disease appropriately.
Yeah, slowly people are slowly coming around to the fact that it is a disease. We haven't got to the point yet where even most doctors, and then what we really want in the future is, scientists, policymakers, politicians to be able to really understand obesity is caused by, the environment we're in, and the fact that there's far too much, processed foods, highly refined carbohydrates, sugar, and the snacking culture, which we're sort of encouraged to get into.
We started one of Ireland's first juice bars back in about 2005 and literally have been juicing for over 30 years. It's one of the quickest way to rebuild your immune system and literally get the essence of any fruit and veg. It's something I do regularly to ensure that my kids are getting more fruit and veg and more high nutrient dense foods.
Yeah, we've partnered with a company called Nama Juicers. They make incredible quality juicers. They've innovated the standard juicer. It's an upright masticating juicer with a hopper. That means that you can juice hands-free. So you simply load the fruit and veg up the top and you don't have to, you just step away and it juices itself. It makes super high quality juice where the pulp literally comes out dry and it's easy to clean. They come with a 15-year warranty. They're offering you 10% off with the code HAPPYPAIR10. That's simply go to namawell.com, use the code HAPPYPAIR10 for 10% off at the checkout.
Wonderful juicer, couldn't recommend them more.
Yeah,
and then regarding our...
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, I guess this wasn't an Achilles heel 150 years ago. It's only been since the Industrial Revolution, and we have these refined carbohydrates, processed foods, and, it wasn't an
And a
issue.
more stressful
Like this
environment.
leptin resistance wasn't an issue. It's only been...
I'll tell you what happened. Yeah, wasn't it? I mean, it's humans trying to be too clever. This is what happens. So we had this whole debate in the 1960s and 70s about whether sugar or cholesterol in the diet caused heart disease. And there was two, and this is explained in the first book. There was two, different schools of thought. In the end, this scientist very famous scientist, American scientist called Ansel Keys, sort of won the argument that high cholesterol levels in your diet caused heart disease. That research has been disproven since, which is why when we talk about saturated fat, it's actually not too bad as far as cardiac risk is concerned. But the fact that the scientific community then thought a highly saturated fat diet caused cardiac disease led to the government recommending a particular type of diet, which was going to be low in saturated fat and high in what they wanted to be whole grains and more vegetable oils. But actually, people don't really eat whole grains, so it then became refined carbohydrates and vegetables. And this sort of started to happen in the 1980s, where people in the Western world changed the way they eat. away from a much more natural, traditional, meat and two veg type of eating to a much more convenience, processed food type of eating with lots of vegetable oils and high carbohydrate levels. And that caused, this explosion of obesity. So when you look at the obesity rates, they were around about like 5% for years, decades. But in the 1980s, suddenly they started shooting up all the way up, from 5-10% to current levels of, 30%, 35%, in some countries, 40 or even 50% of people
Wow.
live with obesity. And this is because we tried to be too clever when we changed the dietary guidelines to our populations.
Wow, jeez. So it's literally at the moment it's gone from 1980s 5% of the population being obese to now in the UK it's probably 30 to 35, and in some Western cultures it can be 40 to nearly 50%.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I mean, I think you guys are younger than me, but
We're
I remember.
45,
Yeah,
45
so
as of last week.
yeah, so like 10 years younger than me. But I remember when I was in school, there wasn't many people living with obesity. Maybe one guy in the whole year. Maybe 1% of 1 or 2% of people would really be suffering. But, I took my daughter to secondary school years ago to take a look around, and literally the change is amazing. It's like 25% of kids now are really, really suffering.
Wow.
Um, so this massive change just in a generation.
Wow, and to go back to weight set point, because that seems to be that's the crux of it, is the weight set point,
Well, the
which is,
leptin resistance
well,
and the
and
weights
it's
of
also the too much insulin in people's body, and it's down to predominantly excess consumption of processed foods and the stress environment, and obviously genetics has a role to play. But in essence, it's people are stressed, people aren't sleeping enough, and they're eating too much processed food. And it's the processed foods, they're so addictive and they're so tasty that people typically eat more of them, and then they get caught up in this vicious cycle.
Well, this is the thing that sort of we delve a little bit deeper into it in the second book, How to Eat and Still Lose Weight, where if you really understand how vulnerable the human brain is to this food environment we have obviously, I'm sure you've talked about reward pathways before, how various different things like a cream cake, or if you're addicted to alcohol or drugs or whatever, they can spark off this beautiful feeling, dopamine feeling. And every time we have sugar, we get this feeling. And actually, the anticipation of sugar or fast foods will give you this feeling. Yeah, and actually, even with gambling, any addictive thing, you know. And then we can develop, bad habits where, actually it's easier to not think and do something. And that actually accounts for around about 45% of our being every day, habits, subconscious stuff that we don't even think about. So the type of food that is available in the supermarket, which is processed, is designer foods to trick the human brain into really wanting it and getting addicted to it. Brightly colored labeling, uh, you know, highly sugared, highly flavored, artificial flavors. Um, and this causes, you to crave and want this food more and more and more. And then we have the advertising, around us, reminding us that there is a McDonald's around the corner, or that there is the availability of some nicely labeled confectionery, that your brain will pick up on that logo and think, oh yeah, I know what that tastes like. Yeah, I really want some of that. We have extremely vulnerable human brains, which, you know, when you actually understand it, it makes it a little bit easier to say, "Oh my gosh, I've really been caught out here, by just the environment that we're around." I don't think anyone particularly is being terrible and trying to deliberately harm people's health. But this is a problem with, you know, capitalism. Things that work and sell and make a profit, as long as they're not highly illegal or obviously illegal, become part of the way we live, so yeah, it's like, I think obesity itself, so it's it's a real heartbreaking condition because people don't understand it, and the advice that us doctors give, go to the gym, get yourself really knackered in the gym, or uh, irritably hungry. uh, it doesn't work, and people blame themselves. But actually, the problem is the food, that the environment, that causing our weight set point to be set higher in particular people.
Yeah,
Yes,
it sounds like, you know, exactly what you were saying there. It's not that people have less willpower or people have less information. It's more that it's an environmental issue that we're living. Our human brain craves these sugary foods. You know, as you said, it's vulnerable, and and they're just everywhere. They're just so prolific. And our basic hardwiring we have this leptin resistance, which happens when we eat too much of these processed foods. Leptin resistance happens, and our hypothalamus absorbs insulin instead of leptin, and it thinks we need more calories. So our human system is being slightly hijacked. So what is the answer? Like, what is
how does one go about resetting their weight point? Because it seems like
their
that's
weight
where
set point?
their weight set point. That's where it all seems to come back to.
Well, I'll tell you, like, just going back into the food environment thing, I think there's one little passage in the second book where we sort of imagine a world where, the government has finally caught on to the fact that, processed food is like quite poisonous. And that there is a law that you can't have any colorful labels on processed food, and you have to have all of the ingredients really, really prominent. So you have all these, shelves of gray cans and boxes of processed food with, all the ingredients, really prominent, no health claims, and the government has also taken out flavorings and colorings. So when you open it or try and eat it, it's gray or brown and it tastes like shit. And then
Wow.
you have all of the fresh food and brightly colored fruits and vegetables and bananas and, red peppers and whatever. They're prominent with proper health claims, phytochemicals, antioxidants, cancer preventing, all these things. That would change, society and how people ate, because our vulnerable human brains would be driven towards the good food, the natural food. So going back to your question, how do you reset your weight set point? So the first thing is the understanding of, if you can somehow reduce your average insulin levels, you're going to release the leptin signal, and then your brain will suddenly think, oh, whoa, actually the gas tank is already full. We don't need to fill up. So actually, by doing the right thing, you won't be going into some sort of hunger mode. Your brain will just bring your weight down. To reduce the level of insulin, we know things like ketogenic dieting, are really, really effective. People lose a load of weight because if they pretty much give up carbohydrates, if they just have 20 or 30 grams of carbohydrates a day and the rest is protein and fat. And we know that works now because we know that that's releasing the leptin signal, But in my experience, ketogenic dieting, is really, really difficult to sustain. So my advice would be to try and decrease your carbohydrate level, average carbohydrate level that you take in every day, to an amount low enough that you don't get terrible cravings for it. And we know that, in an average, slightly unhealthy Western diet, we take in actually about 300 grams of sugar, carbohydrates per day. If we take in everything that we, it's quite easy to get that down to 100 grams if you know the load of carbohydrate in each food stuff that we take in. It's called the glycemic load. So that's the first thing, to get into a diet which is pretty much home prepared and lowish in carbohydrates, and then to look into time restricted eating is really, really good because you're decreasing your insulin levels, for 16, 18 hours. So if you can eat, just for a 6 or 8 hour window, that's really good for your weight set point and your insulin levels. And the final thing is, looking at them, this is getting slightly complex, looking at omega-3 and omega-6 levels in your bloodstream and around your cells. If you can optimize these things and get rid of omega-6 and, flood your body with much more omega-3, the effectiveness of your insulin, the efficiency of your insulin will improve massively, and you'll become internally a different person, much more efficient. So, just by, avoiding fried processed food, food that sits on a supermarket shelf for 6 months, like all the jars of sauces and things, fast foods and you avoid cooking with vegetable oils, these are things that have very, very high levels of omega-6, which, detrimentally affects how insulin works and also causes inflammation, and in my opinion is one of the reasons that, we have inefficient bodies as far as insulin is concerned. If you can flood your body with natural foods, including, foods that contain a lot of omega-3, um, you will change how your metabolism works as well. So yeah, these things are things that you can eventually reset your set point. So that's just the food. If you then look at stress, so high levels of stress either at work or in the family are going to cause high levels of cortisol. Cortisol, causes high levels of insulin. So if you can teach yourself to be able to relax, and if you can try and untangle your family and work stresses, that will reduce your insulin levels as well. And finally, sleep. We know sleep is massively important as well. So
Wow, really interesting. So in terms of weight set point, we've got number one. It was reduce your insulin in your bloodstream, and how you do that is reducing your carb levels. And I had a question there in terms of that was about when you say carbs. Like my understanding is that 80% of the carbs that the average person eats in the UK and Ireland, for example, are refined white carbs. So, but whereas you look at the longest living populations, they're carb centric diets. Like if you look at the Okinawa or the, Icarian in Greece, or the longest blue zone type populations, they eat a carbohydrate centric diet, but it's a veg centered carbohydrate. Like it's sweet potatoes or it's
Brown
rice or it's brown whole grain types of carbs. So what are your thoughts then if someone is eating a more like a whole grain based carb? Would you still recommendation to reduce it from 300 grams to 100 grams of carbs?
yeah, I mean, I think, it's really difficult to get 300 grams of sugar into your body. And that's because people are having processed food diet. So I think if you're eating a whole food diet of, sort of, yeah, whole grains, proper whole grains and vegetables, um, your, yeah, your glycemic load is going to be less. Um, but yeah, I agree that, there's a lot of people who don't suffer with obesity, who have, a very relatively high carbohydrate diet. But, I don't think in general terms their load of sugar is that high.
So the sugar and the type of carbs,
Yeah.
like what I was talking about there is that there's the people who eat more a whole food based diet, it's going to be higher in fiber. The carbohydrate will because it's whole grain, so it won't affect the insulin levels to the degree
Yeah.
if someone was eating processed foods, which has got no fiber and
And also,
lots of
going back
omega-6s.
to that omega-3/6 thing, these people are going to have, because they're not having, a lot of processed foods or fast foods or whatever, um, their insulin efficiency is going to be much better. They're different people compared to, if they were exposed to a fast food diet, a processed food diet, you know, their level of processing, you know, natural sugars is much more efficient than someone who takes in a Western diet,
Mm.
because the ratio of omega-3 and omega-6 is much more healthy and natural.
And then what role, just to move it slightly, just very linked, but just slightly different, is down to metabolism. Many people feel they're born with either a quick or a slow metabolism. One, what role does metabolism play and the genetic predisposition of someone's metabolism?
If you're interested in weight loss or weight management, our Happy Shape Challenge is starting January the 6th. That's a 4-week course with no calorie counting, no portion control. It's about helping you to become confident, learn how to cook delicious food, how to stock your kitchen, meal plans, shopping lists. It's simple, it's practical, it's easy. We've done it over the last 5 years. There'll be hundreds of people taking part in it, and there's a great support and community around it.
Yeah, and I think one of the keys is ultimately how to develop sustainable behaviors so that you can be healthier and happier into the long term.
Yeah, and your Happy Shape is just a product of it. Yeah, so it's all about feeling great, building confidence, creating sustainable habits. It starts January the 6th. We'd love to have you part of it. Simply go to our website. It's €75 to sign up for it. Or if you're part of our Whole Health Tribe, it's included as part of that. Or if you're part of our recipe club, you can simply upgrade. There's a cheaper price for that. But we'd love to have you a part of it. It's highly effective. It's about helping support you to reach your happy shape. So January the 6th, and you can sign up on our website if you're interested.
So yeah, that's a really good question. I think basal metabolism, and this is the metabolism that you use before moving, and it actually accounts for about 75% of all of the energy we use. This is the energy we use for thinking, heating our body, heartbeat, immune defense, all of these things. This accounts for, around 70% of our total. Okay. So the rest of it is walking around, doing our jobs, maybe going to the gym, whatever. So that's quite a lot. And that's not in our control at all. We can't sort of get up and say, okay, I want to double my basal metabolism today just to burn off more calories.
So basal metabolism is kind of like
when we get to the gym.
Basal metabolism, just for anyone listening who isn't familiar with these terms, that's like your resting metabolic rate, as in how quick your body can burn calories
While sitting.
while sitting.
Yeah, while sitting or laying down without moving. The thing about basal metabolism, it's massively variable. So if you compare a group of people who are the same age, the same weight, the same sex, you would expect, their basal metabolism to be similar. But actually, if you look at the bottom 5% of metabolizers compared to the top 5%, there's about a 700 kilocalorie a day difference. So this is why, and this is the same as more than a 10K run or very vigorous activity in the gym for an hour, and this is why and I hear all the time, oh, I live with a flatmate and she can eat double what I eat and she doesn't suffer with her weight. It's like, why is that? But actually, if you know the dynamics of basal metabolism, you understand these things. Some people, have extremely efficient metabolisms or low metabolisms. And as we sort of said right at the start of this podcast, if you do calorie restrict and you get down to 1,000, 1,200 kilocalories a day, within a month, your body will have adapted to it. Your basal metabolism will have come down from, will have decreased by 600,
Wow.
And there's some really eloquent studies looking. So it's not just when you calorie restrict, but actually when you exercise, your body will tend to adapt and become more efficient as well. So there is a famous study of the run across America, which is like this crazy everyday marathon from East Coast to West Coast. It takes, about a month, and they get 1 day off a week, but every day is a marathon for the runners. And they looked at their their basal metabolism, and they found that actually after about a week of doing marathons, the basal metabolism of the runners decreased by 600 kilocalories a day. So that's in the bigger scheme of things, in a marathon is going to take up 4 times that amount of energy. But actually, the bodies were metabolizing much more efficiently, and they were resting and using less energy when they were sleeping, for instance. But, sometimes that can have detrimental effect. If you really push it, it's going to be to such an extent that the body's saving so much energy that your hair's not growing properly, your skin looks terrible, your immune system, you basically get burnout. And you see this sometimes with some athletes.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, we found that we did a 130-kilometer run there in September. So we were training, doing 65 kilometers a week, and definitely found that your body just got used to it. And you thought you'd lose weight or you'd be thin, but it didn't really your body just adapted, and maybe we got more efficient during sleep or other things.
Yeah,
But
I
it was
think so.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I went cycling with my girls, my teenage girls, a few years ago in Costa Rica. It was like quite a hardcore holiday, but everyone put weight on, and we were eating really good. Yeah, it's like, what's happening here? It's not these things that you think are obvious are not actually obvious at all.
There's a concept which I had heard, which was your metabolism is a function of the amount of lean muscle mass you have. So, for example, if someone is obese and has no lean muscle mass, their metabolism is going to be slow. Whereas if someone is an Olympic sprinter who's super lean and muscly, they're going to have a much stronger metabolism. Is that correct way of looking at it?
Yeah, I think if you've got a big lean muscle mass, your metabolism on average is going to be much higher than someone who's got not much muscle. So yeah, This is, I mean, this is a problem as well when, when people have been, constantly going on low calorie diets and losing weight and then putting it back on, losing it and then putting it back on, they tend to lose a bit of muscle mass as well. So, these people, tend to then accumulate fat around their middles, and they will have a relatively slim, frame and muscular body. Their metabolism is going to be even lower. So, it's like making everything even less efficient.
Yeah. There was a core concept which you talked about in How to Eat and Still Lose Weight, which was the idea of your weight set point consistently going up when you do try these crash dieting. And that was really interesting because I think lots of people listening who have, or if anyone who's listening or knows someone who has struggled with like weight loss, and it kind of, instead of it going down, it goes up, and they kind of get really frustrated and really angry with it. What is the scientific reasoning? Because you've got great explanations of this.
My patients just told me this, and then, then I would say to my medical students sitting in the clinic with me, what they're going to say? They're going to say that they've been dieting for 10, 20 years, and that they can lose weight on a diet, but then the diet stops working because we get metabolic adaptation, and then they come off the diet and they put the weight all the way back up to the set point and more. And I say this to the medical students, and then they look at me like, was this coach? And then, no, I've not seen this patient before, but I know what they're going to say, because this is like really, really common. And I don't know about scientific explanations, but I just think, if you look at logic of, when the brain is calculating, hang on, how much energy do we need in this body to store? And it's sort of set generally at 2 months, But if you teach your body that you're in quite a hostile environment where there is a food shortage or a calorie restriction every couple of months, then it's natural, isn't it, that your body would want to store more energy in order to adapt to those times. So that's what I think the explanation is. You're sort of training your body to be able to survive more and more diets, because the brain can't differentiate between a food shortage, environmental food shortage, a famine, and a calorie restricting diet. So I think that's the explanation, just some sort of logical, of course that would happen.
Makes a lot of sense when you hear that. That's great logic.
Really, really sensible.
I like
That's
it.
a really
very
good.
commonsensical. It makes a lot of sense. I'm like, yeah, very wise.
So what I'm really understanding, just to recap, for anyone listening, like the current food environment, obesity is thriving in the current food culture because it's got so much excess of omega-6s, which are inhabited, which is the seed oils, which are in a lot of processed foods because they help with short shelf life. And the processed foods are also really high in refined carbohydrates, sugar. Average person getting about 300 grams of sugar. Their metabolism, the insulin is blocking the leptin. We get leptin resistance. So therefore the body thinks instead of storing 2 months of energy, it's storing 6 months of energy. And really what you had kind of suggested ways of overcoming this is, number one, being aware of this and starting. Then number two is starting eating, like cutting out refined carbohydrates as much as you can, or dropping them down, focusing on foods that aren't, high in refined carbohydrates, reducing seed oils, managing your stress and your sleep, because those, cortisol spikes insulin. And it sounds so simple, yet we live in a society that is really, as you said,
you're swimming upstream.
I think that's like a fantastic summary. But when your body's storing the 6 months of energy, but you're on, the Western diet, too much insulin, too much vegetable oils, whatever, insulin isn't working properly. The signal is that you're only storing 1 month. So this is why people, living with obesity, they're getting the wrong signal. And this is why they're constantly starving and tired, and, people who have a proper obesity, and it's really visual, they're embarrassed to eat in public because everyone's going to sort of look at them and judge them. So they all binge eat in private. But that's the response to the signals their brain's receiving, that they're fading away. So the whole crux of this misunderstanding of the disease obesity is we think, it's a character flaw. People are too hungry, too greedy, and too lazy. Actually, no, they're the symptoms of the condition. So the condition causes, the signaling, that's going to cause them to want to eat and to go and rest.
Well, so it sounds like it's leptin resistance is the root cause of the issue.
If you can understand leptin resistance and adjust things in your diet and your environment to decrease your insulin levels and improve the efficiency and function of insulin via omega-3 adaptation, you're going to be okay. You're going to reset your set point. It can take, it's not like an overnight thing. It can take up to a year, but actually it should be fun. It should be tastier food. It's going to decrease inflammation in your body. So other conditions that you may have been suffering from are going to get better. But it's going to, be the end of that constant battle of, dietary restriction. Finally, you've reached a relatively healthy way where your body wants to be. And that's sort of like, if you can follow the ideas in the book, that's what, the book was sort of written to stop people going on low calorie diets and just to try and get them onto relatively healthy eating to understand why it works.
Wow, it's such a good explanation. Like it really is. It's not mainstream yet. Like leptin resistance is not something you hear talked about. You talk about calorie counting is still the main language of weight loss, whereas what you're talking about is
Resetting your weight point.
resetting your weight set point.
Yeah, just understanding, exactly. It's not the calories in the food, it's the food in the calories. I think that's a good explanation.
And by
That's a
that,
great one.
that you're referring to, is it a processed food or is it a whole food or a real
Yeah,
food?
it's what the food does to your body. It's not the calories that go into your body, because your body's in control. Your metabolism is in control. It can get rid of calories, just as you can save 600 kilocalories a day, you can get rid of them very easily, And actually, we would have a bigger problem with obesity in this society if human metabolism wasn't over metabolizing to try and keep people down. And this is right, when you really look into the figures, high blood pressure, is endemic in Western people who consume a Western diet. That's because people are over metabolizing, it causes high blood pressure.
Makes it over metabolizing, and this is where you reference snacking.
Yeah. So when you look at, the amount of calories that an average, for instance, American consumes compared to 30, 40 years ago, it's like 500 kilocalories a day more. And that's like a kilogram every couple of weeks when you just do the, the calories in, calorie out calculations. 20 kilograms a year. This is 3 stone a year. So why isn't everyone 40 stone? It's because we're over metabolizing.
And the cost of over metabolizing is high blood pressure and
Yeah.
probably inflammation.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
Hyperactive immune system. We got too much energy. We just got to get rid of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow, fascinating.
and there is I've often heard other doctors or other experts say that inflammation is the root of a lot of diseases.
Western diseases. Yeah.
Yeah, Western
definitely.
diseases. Yeah, good clarification. Yeah.
And then, Andrew, I just wonder about metabolism. Am I oversimplifying it? If someone does want to improve their metabolic rate, it's in essence they want to try to improve the amount of lean muscle they have. Or that's one way of doing it.
Or sleep better, or cut out seed oils
And stress.
and stress less.
Yeah, I think basically, you can go down to the gym and try and build up a little bit. But I think if you just concentrate on actually, rather than, the gym is good and it's going to improve your insulin efficiency and things like this if you get fit. But actually, rather than use the time, you can use the time, in the gym instead, in the kitchen cooking, rather than getting in a delivery or some fast food. That's more beneficial, if you know what I mean. Obviously, the gym's good, but the food going into your body is the crucial part of things. So if you get that right, then your basal your weight set point is going to come down naturally, and probably your metabolism is going to improve, as your brain wants to burn off any excess energy that you have, and it can now see that excess energy.
So they're almost a function of one another, or they are a function of one another.
You've led me onto a great now this is my view on a lot of people's it comes to January's coming along now, and a lot of people will join a gym. They'll join a gym rather than starting to cook. Like in your experience as a bariatric surgeon and 20 plus years experience in the weight loss field as a really, someone who's done a lot of research in it, what do you see? Like, where do you see the weight being in terms of the effectiveness of losing weight in terms of food, like like optimizing your food and focusing on your food, or joining the gym? Because it seems, from my perception, that a lot of people will join a gym.
So if you've got a little weight on in December because you've been partying, you've been, enjoying, a little bit unhealthy food, too many mince pies, whatever, and you've put on 5 kilograms or something, rather than going to the gym, just going back to your normal way of eating, which is not a December way of eating. By the end of February, you will have lost that 5 kilograms without any effort. You don't need to go to the gym. Your weight will have just reset to its normal level. So yeah, and if you actually then want to say, well, actually, maybe my weight setting was high even before December, and I want to lose not just the December weight, but maybe another 5K. Then if you, eat a vegetable-based diet, if you eat meat and fish, then meat, fish, vegetables, no snacking, really enjoying getting into cooking, no vegetable oils, lots of, fresh, green, omega-3 containing foods, maybe time-restricted eating. If that all becomes part of the way you are, you will lose that weight. You'll reset to a much healthier weight.
Is there such a thing as an exam or a study that someone can do, or a test that someone can do to find out what their weight set point is?
No, I think everyone sort of knows what it is because it tends to just go back there no matter what. So I certainly know mine. I'm lucky enough to come from a family who are pretty slim, but I can almost calibrate whenever I'm in my clinic. There's obviously scales there all the time. It's almost exactly the same every single time. And I think you guys probably know,
Yeah.
you may go up a couple of kilograms, but it tends to be your weight set point, and most people will know it.
We've been the same weight
But
for
also, people
25
really
years.
really interestingly, and this totally fits in with the explanation of where the weight set point comes from. How the brain calculates it. People will say, "Well, I have an American weight," so when they move to America for 6 months or a year, they'll put weight on. When they move back to the UK, they'll lose some weight. If they moved, for instance, from the UK to, I don't know, the UAE or South Africa, they would lose more weight. So they have people describe having different weights depending on which country they live in. Their American weight or their UK weight or their.
And that's down
So
to
it's
different
fascinating.
environments, different
Food
food
environment.
environments, and
Food
different
and
stress.
definitely. Yeah.
Wow. So it sounds like what you were saying there, just to bring it back to that question I asked about weight versus diet. Like, your focus would really be on eating real food that you home cook, like home cook, that's based around, and cutting out snacking. Don't cook with vegetable oils, because they inhibit your insulin. They will inhibit
Well, they'll encourage excess omega-6, which
your
most people have.
metabolism becomes less efficient, or your leptin resistance becomes, your leptin functioning becomes less.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of debate about vegetable oils, but, there's two different camps. The traditionalist camp is that, there's research out there to show that it's really heart healthy. These people don't understand that the diet heart hypothesis has been disproved, decades ago. And actually, natural saturated fat, doesn't cause increased cardiac risk unless you have familial hypercholesterolemia, 1 in 500 people. Why would we want to eat? Why would we want to develop a type of food that is totally not a human food? We don't eat seed. Some of these seed oils naturally, saffron oil, whatever. Sunflower oils, tend not to be a natural human food. Why are we consuming so much of this food? And then when you look into the epidemiology of what happens to populations that are exposed to a lot of seed oils, they have inflammatory disease and they're obese. So there's two camps, but I think the more recent research and the epidemiology that joined up sensible thinking is that they're probably not good for us at all.
Your message is so clear. Like, it's really
Very distilled.
succinct and really useful. Like, it's so
Can I?
good.
I think
I
it's
really
wonderful.
appreciate it.
Can I go then to lead us on to bariatric surgery and the idea of someone getting a portion of their stomach removed? How does that work, and how does that fit into your solution, which you're providing, which is you know, as Dave said, it's very succinct, clear, and makes a lot of sense.
So we used to think that, for instance, removing 2/3, 3/4 of someone's stomach, or bypassing the stomach gastric bypass, works because of the restriction of the amount of food that you can take in. That's the sort of secondary effect. It's a little bit of the effect. But actually those operations are amazingly powerful. For instance, if you're really suffering with obesity, if you're 20, 25, 30 stone, you know, even good diets are not going to change things, particularly as you've got this vulnerable human brain and, you know, you've got all these addictions to terrible foods. It's going to be like almost impossible to get out of it, you know, by dieting and lifestyle, even if you do understand it. Um, so these operations work by changing the messages from your stomach and your intestines, and these are hormones that are produced after eating that go into your blood and into your hypothalamus, the weight control center, and it totally flips them around. So, for instance, gastric bypass, you get these two satiety hormones from your intestine released really, really early. So GLP-1 and PYY are satiety hormones that will mean you just don't want to eat. So the gastric bypass really tricks people into thinking that they've eaten a lot when they haven't by these hormonal signals. And, you know, actually just going on from that, scientists were like intrigued. Why, for instance, diabetes, type 2 diabetes will improve overnight after a gastric bypass. Sometimes it will go away. And this is because of this hormone GLP-1, which significantly improves insulin signaling, but also causes satiety. And so they were really intrigued by this GLP-1 hormone from, you know, gastric bypass. And then they refined it, and this is what Ozempic is now, the new sort of miracle weight loss drug. It comes from scientists being intrigued about how the gastric bypass, you know, literally could cure recently diagnosed type 2 diabetes, you know, overnight. So those drugs originally became, you know, diabetic drugs, but now they've been refined to weight loss drugs as well.
What are your thoughts on
So
those?
it's a signaling, you know, that changes in bariatric surgery that causes, you know, the total weight reset, and people will just totally feel that their brain wants them to be a healthier way. It's so sort of transformative and releasing for them. You know, these people have really suffered with their self-esteem and, you know, various different issues of people judging them. And suddenly, a relatively normal weight, they can buy normal clothes again. You know, these things that we don't even think about. People don't look at them on the bus because they're taking 2 seats, you know. So these things are really, really important for massive parts of the population. You're going to ask me about
Well,
Ozempic?
I just thought you mentioned
Dave,
it, so
but before we go into that, I'd love to just understand bariatric or like bariatric surgery, because it's fascinating. So if I get bariatric surgery, do I typically, like the main thing that occurs seems that it's the hormonal change that this GLP-1 to my brain. That's the biggest thing. And the second thing is probably that I consume less food because my stomach is smaller. That's a secondary, less important factor?
Yeah, and you don't really want to consume much food. You know, it doesn't matter that your stomach has been reduced in capacity, but the consequences of bypassing, you know, the stomach. So undigested food gets into the early part of the intestine. The intestine then releases all of these hormones, GLP-1, PYY, probably a lot of hormones that we haven't discovered yet, and that profoundly affects, you know, you feel as if you've had a 3 or 4 course banquet, you know, without that unpleasant, you know, pressure feeling of your stomach being full, that brain feeling of, no, I don't want to have a cake or a snack. It's just like, no, you get that within 10 minutes of consuming anything after a gastric bypass, and it will last for a long time.
wow.
And it's just
So did they lose? Like what I've read before is that sometimes they can lose. Like food isn't as fun or as enjoyable or as pleasurable as it used to be. But I guess that's the cost of going from being very obese to being thin.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are worried that it's going to change their character if they have a gastric bypass. But I think it sort of actually improves things. People always say, "Oh, I wish I'd had this 10 years ago." So I think actually it just switches off the appetite a little bit. You will become hungry, but, you know, food's not going to control you. Imagine if you've got leptin resistance, you're carrying, 6 months or a year's worth of fuel on board. Everyone in the street is looking at you. There's clearly something wrong. Everyone thinks it's because you're got a bad character, you're lazy and greedy. But actually, you've got this condition that even you can't get out of by starving yourself or whatever, you know. And the fact that you're feeling starving all the time, then suddenly you have a procedure where all of those leptin signals are going to your brain. Your brain probably does. You just don't feel like eating. And I don't think, yeah, you may get a psychological effect of and a lot of people, comfort eat or stress eat. You may lose that, dopamine buzz of the food. And yeah, all bariatric units will have a psychologist to help you with that. It's good to be able to, take control of your own relaxation and be able to relax without resorting to basically drugs, food. So yeah, it's a profound change after bariatric surgery. Profound.
And then can people still digest food properly without their stomach, or with significantly less stomach?
So gastric bypass tends to cause some malabsorption for the first year. Every patient's asked to take lifelong vitamin and mineral supplements, but after 1 year, it readapts and there is no malabsorption.
Wow.
So malabsorption again was something that people thought, oh, it's because it's malabsorption. It's not.
Wow.
It's a change in the gut hormone that is signaling to the brain and the satiety center.
And I know this is off topic, but it's only just you mentioned Ozempic, and I couldn't help but ask you, with your incredible experience and your very useful information. What are your thoughts on Ozempic and
similar drugs?
So I've got a lot of patients on it. The problem is, once you come off it, within a year, 2/3 of the weight goes back on. So I'm actually in the process of producing a program where, if you do want to take the drug, you then have a real understanding of what the hell's going on in your body during that time you're on it. And then when you come off it, hopefully your whole food, the way you eat and what you eat has changed and you don't put as much weight back on. The philosophical thing about this, blockbusting weight loss drug that is making pharmaceutical companies, more powerful than small countries, is this sort of analogy, and I put this in the first book actually before Ozempic was mainstream. If you've got like a patient who's trodden on a drawing pin, and he's in hospital, and you say to, and I'm there teaching the medical students, and I say to the medical students, what's the best treatment for this man? One of them will say paracetamol, one will say, no, that's not enough, ibuprofen, one will say, no, we need tramadol, one will say, no, we need some morphine. And then the clever one will say, well, actually, why do you need to ask him to take the drawing pin out? So we're treating ourselves with some, really expensive drug that's actually quite effective, but we don't know the long-term effects of it, but we're totally ignoring the cause of the problem in the first place, the food environment we have. So yeah, that's my sort of philosophical take on.
It's a great one. I love. Well, how do we change the food environment? Because as you said, like the pharmaceutical companies are getting bigger and bigger. They certainly ain't gonna, capitalism. There's a moral aspect to a degree, but like profit, it tends to be profit. To pay shareholders. That's the kind of system, and that's the flaw in it, and it's the way that it is. But in terms of changing our food culture, how does this happen? Our food environment, because it's such a massive thing. It's not just causing obesity, this type 2 diabetes, it's influencing so much disease of affluence in the West.
I mean, the message needs to get out, the message that I'm trying to promote from the books. And there's a few other people like talking about this. What causes obesity in the first place, and overweight and obesity and inflammatory diseases, And I think it's slowly, the tide is starting to change. People are looking for new ideas. But at the same time, it is, I would say, almost a failure of not just capitalism, but democracy. So even if we understood, the food culture and the food environment and the fact that it's causing obesity and overweight for this particular reason, not for calories, the solution is to actually have quite high taxes on processed foods and to use that revenue, to promote, the ideas, the understanding of weight regulation, and really to promote fresh food and cooking, to make it really cool again, get some famous athletes, advertising, fresh foods, on the TV from the revenue from food tax, But, I can't see any government doing that because it's going to be really unpopular. People want to have their sugar food for cheap. Um, so this is again a sort of failure of almost, Western governments in that they want to keep it a little bit popular so that they get re-elected.
But ultimately, it costs the government millions, if billions, the cost of obesity and the cost of overweight,
Type 2 diabetes and all of those.
and the associated diseases.
Yeah, but it's the problem is short-termism, the short-termism of having to have an election within a few years usually, whereas the effects of a food tax isn't going to be, felt for 20 years probably as far as savings on the NHS is concerned.
Yeah, I suppose life is so demanding, and
I like your
short-term pleasures of processed food it's an immediate dopamine hit, and it's it's absolute short-termism at a micro scale, and you're talking about macro scale short-termism in terms of governments and population and not making the hard decision.
So this is why we're a bit stuck. Yeah.
I loved your suggestion at the start where ideally processed food, they weren't allowed to use bright colours and they had to put the ingredients in the front. I think that's an immediately something you're
crazy.
like, wow, that's
It would be crazy.
transform the shopping experience.
Yeah, but that's how our brain thinks, It looks for the bright stuff, it looks for the sugary stuff. And yeah, if you got like an apple and a Snicker bar, and there's only one winner, the Snicker bar always.
Yeah, just as a mammal, that's what happens.
To your like to your vulnerable brain, particularly for a child, it doesn't have,
Yeah, the ability to think it through
Yeah.
fully.
Your work is incredible. Like I really
And your ability
admire
to
it so
articulate it
much.
is beautiful. Very calm and sensible.
thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really excellent. Yeah, like as I said, I've read most of your second book. It's been in my house for a year, and over the last 6 months I've dipped in and out of it, and I really, really enjoyed it. I found
Yeah, so the second one's coming out as paperback in January. Blue Monday, as usual, is the release date. So this is the date everyone's coming off their New Year diets because they don't work, as we just discussed. Better off just going back to the way you eat normally, and the December weight will come off anyway. The third Monday in January. So I think this time it's the 18th of January is the paperback launch.
How to Eat and Still Lose Weight and paperback.
That's it's still this way, yeah. And yeah, it's and at the same time, around the same time, we're releasing my my sort of new venture called My Metabology. So Metabology is the name of the first book of what medical students should be learning about weight regulation, but we don't. So My Metabology is an online education program. Just a lot of people don't want to read a book of 80,000 words. So this will make it easier to understand the concepts in the book, and hopefully if you also want to take the drug, help you come off the drug and not put the weight back on. So that's called My Metabology. So yeah, look out for that.
And when's that coming out for anyone who's...
So that should be out in January, actually. It's going to be called, well, the website's mymetabology.com. So yeah, we're rolling it out pretty soon. Yeah, should be out there by January.
Brilliant. Well done. Well, yeah, incredible. Yeah, so paperback book coming out Blue Monday, 18th of January. I'd really recommend it. It's excellent. Yeah, it really drew me in to reach out to you and see if you'd be a guest.
Yeah. If you're Chinese, we got the Chinese version of the book.
Oh, I love that. Congratulations. That's a great one.
Have you got to go to China on a book tour?
Unfortunately, not yet. So, for the Arabic one.
Jeez,
Good
how many
job.
languages have been translated into?
Russian.
Good job.
Amazing.
Must be. We've had some books in different languages. Must be
Italian.
amazing.
Italian.
When you get that email from the publishers and they say, "Oh, so such and such a country wants to take it. Do you want to negotiate?" So no, just accept and wait for the little package of 4 books and put them on your shelf. It's really nice to have on your shelf.
Wow,
I
that's
love it.
brilliant.
You've had a few translated as well, have you?
We've
Yeah,
had
I
a few
think
in
ours are in
French and
4.
German and Dutch.
Yeah, it's nice.
Dutch.
Yeah.
It's a privilege. And you look at it and it's some of the language you don't speak and you're just like, wow, this is bizarre and what a privilege.
Yeah. Well, I really wish you continued support and continued. If we can ever blow wind in your sails, I align with everything you say so much, and we're with you. We're with you on this journey. So if we can ever be of help,
Well,
please.
I mean, I think you're doing really good stuff. I just been watching a few of your podcasts, so all fantastic. Where are you based? In Ireland?
Based in Ireland, yeah, we do a lot of work in the UK. We're over there a lot. We've products, so
Okay, good.
books.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'm sure we'll
We'll cross paths.
cross paths in the future. Yeah.
yeah.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
Well, thanks again,
Andrew.
Andrew. Have a great
Yeah.
day.